Good evening and welcome to the February 7th, 2023 regular meeting for the Township Board of the Township of Meridian. Please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Lemaster, can we have a roll call? Here.
Clerk Guthrie.
Here.
Treasurer DeShane.
Here.
Trustee Hendrickson.
Here.
Trustee Sundland.
Here.
Trustee Wilson.
Here.
Trustee Wazinski.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Tonight, item 4 on our agenda is presentations. We have 4. And the first is, a presenter will be introduced by Trustee Wilson.
We are delighted tonight to have our newly elected 75th District House Representative, Penelope Serenglu, here to talk about her efforts as a new member of the House of Representatives and also as chair of the Election Committee. Penelope is both a wife, mother, small business owner, attorney, former Ingham County Commissioner for multiple terms, and she represents the northern portion of Meridian Township, north of Grand River Avenue, and also portions of Clinton County and Shiawassee County under the newly drawn districts last year. Representative Serenglu has already held an open house and invited local officials to come and bring their issues before her, and several of us on the board took that opportunity to go to her office and share our local interests and issues. So without further ado, Representative Serenglu.
Thank you, Marna, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to come and talk to you. I don't know that I have exactly a presentation really prepared, but I did want to just introduce myself and let you all know that I am here to advocate for your issues in the State House. Hazlet is a very large portion of my district. I'm also just everything north of Grand River, so I think there's a little bit of Okemos in there. And I mean, so far, we've only been at it for a few weeks here, but we have had a lot of things introduced, and we are working on, getting our working class and families, the relief that they need. Some of our seniors by repealing the pension tax. So personally, I am chairing the Elections Committee. I'm also on the Judiciary Committee, the Criminal Justice Committee, and the Housing Subcommittee. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of overlap there with some things that you might be working on in the township. The Elections Committee has a lot of work this session because we'll be implementing Proposal 2, which is the early voting, the permanent absentee voter list, among some other changes. We've heard from our Secretary of State, Attorney General, and the Municipal Clerks Association already, and we'll be hearing from the county clerks and a lot more organizations involved. And we've heard requests to further protect our election workers, which we will also be working on. And really just a number of issues that include voter access and just help our clerks, our local clerks throughout the state be able to do their jobs and make all the changes that they've been waiting for a long time. So we do have a lot of work ahead with that. I also reached out recently to see what, some of your, budget priorities are, that I can advocate for, as well as just any policy changes that you would like to see happen at a state level. I'm here, in my office every day, Monday through Friday. So please, reach out, meet with me, send me, your ideas. I know we've already had some conversations with Marna Wilson and Phil DeShane, about some things you could use assistance with, and I'd be happy to connect with, the rest of you on what we can do. So, yeah, that's really all that I had prepared for tonight. But I really look forward, to working with all of you and, doing my best to advocate for Meridian. So thank you for having me, and I hope that I can hear more from you in the future. And my door is always open. Come visit me if you haven't already, and I'm happy to hear from you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Sondergruth. Back to work. Item 4B is a introduction of our new county commissioner for Meridian Township. Clerk Guthrie will introduce her.
Thank you. I have the honor and pleasure of introducing Simar Pawar, our new Ingham County Commissioner in the 13th District. I have known Simar for almost a year now. I wish I had known her much longer than that. She is one of the most remarkable people that I've ever worked with, and most dedicated persons that I've ever known. She's a mom and a huge big-time family person, so we get along really well talking about family and important family matters. Summer has been working with us on our election team since last May, and we both have a little bit of ADD in regards to organization. And Summer has been a true leader in our on our elections team in the back room. And we have 160 plus election workers, and Summer was a major component of making sure that our elections went well this year. So I'm excited to have her be appointed to the county commission in the 13th district, and to work with her in that capacity as well.
Thanks, Deborah. That's very tall order, what you all said. I try my best on an everyday basis, but I'm not sure if it's up to all of that. I would like to take a minute to say hello to every one of you. Most of you in the boardroom here have seen me walking these halls, as Deborah said, many times, in and out. But Deb said she knew me about a year ago, but I have known Deb for 22 plus years. I've followed her through Meridian Township. I've seen all of you run your campaigns, do your stuff, because I've been a resident of this township for almost 30 plus years. So I've lived in Hazlet. Most of my life in US, I lived in Ingham County. All of it, I lived in Ingham County, so I've been an Ingham County resident. And Hazlet has been home. Very first week I landed here in US, I ended up taking a CATA bus to a little stop with 1640 Hazlet Road, which is now a mixed-use business, and it used to be a computer center that high school ran for young children who didn't finish their high schools. I'm not sure, I think it was OE Learning. It was part of the Meridian High School. And I started my computer education there because I was 17, 18 years old, was trying to figure out how MSU is gonna work for me, how Lansing Community College is gonna work for me. So that was my first place that I came to, Hazlet, about a week into coming to this country. Past that, I ended up, now the house that I live in is across the street from there, and I saw that house being built. So Meridian Township has been home for me. I moved to Okemos. First lived in East Lansing to Hazlet. Once came to Hazlet, was just Okemos for a couple of years, and then back to Hazlet again. So Hazlet has been a long time home. Most of the community members who are watching the presentation from their Zoom links, they probably know me as Samar. 90% of the population here calls me Samar. My name is Simmer, and I would respond to hey you. So, as long as we're talking business, as long as we are talking progress of the community, I was raised with a value system that is, you get the spanking if you don't get the job done. All of that is illegal now. Even parents don't use that, school system doesn't use it. But I found out a few of the key phrases that my parents used that helped me along up till this day. And I think till the day I die, they will help me work on a regular basis. One of that was, my mom would routinely say it. It was very we were all four of us kids were offended when she would say it. She says, even the dog wags the tail before he sits down. We're never going to understand what that meant. I said, the dog is loyal? What is she getting at? But all she meant was, you are kids, humans, thinking brains. The dog sits down, wags the tail, cleans the place before he sits down. Work. Get stuff in order. So that has always been the driving force, because we knew that we were responsible to our parents. We were responsible for the school system. We were responsible. So we grew up that way. Coming to US, that stayed with me. The other phrase that is more spiritual to me, that I would use to guide me as I'm in this new role, is Jahan Bhaiya Bala Kaiya. That comes from Punjabi language, which translates to pretty much, wherever you sit, talk good about it. So how that shapes me up is, because there have been places where I went, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this is this. So we set up a rule in the household: if you complain about something 3 times, you have to go fix it. And hence, I was part of the election system because I complained about being in the line too long. So my kids call me up to it and say, you have to fill out the application. I complained about the park system being dirty. She says, Mom, you're going to work in the parks now, which I did. So Ingham County Parks, the Lake Lansing Park South entrance, that is my pride and joy. That's where I spend my summers. So most people in Hasler would know me as a plant lady. I belong to Meridian Garden Club, HPA, some of those are my service organizations. And they stay close to my heart. That service, I would continue to do so. The new role that I was sworn into, January 24th, is of District 13 Commissioner. Amy Salisbury, she contested the election. She had to, for family reasons, not carry on the position, and I was asked if I would fill in. I had no concept, because while this election was being contested, fought for, promises were made, I was in the election backroom trying to make sure that everything was going smoothly. So I had to very quickly brush up on what my duties would be, what my role would be. And I want to say that I see it as a lot of work. I don't see it as like I'm going to come and show up to the meetings, go home. I would have a lot of learning to do. I'm open to do the learning. I would like to encourage my fellow citizens where I chose to call home to keep me honest, to keep me informed, keep talking to me, let me know what their agendas are. I've been assigned to Human Services Committee, Law and Courts Committee, and I plan to do the due diligence, learn what I don't know, and add the ideas of wherever somebody wants me to share the ideas. I would like to look upon all of these community leaders that I have seen, and my kids have seen, they've grown up looking up to all of you, watching over Meridian. I would like to do the same job with you all, hand in hand, working together for the betterment of the community. And I will be doing this service day in, day out, till the residents want me to do it. And the beauty of election system is, if I fail, keep me honest, elect another one. So, because I do feel that each office, the person who steps up in the office, they should stay in the office for as long as they can do the duty diligently. So I hope to do that for next 2 years, and from there on, moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Power. We move on now to item 4C, which is the introduction of new home TV interns. And I believe Samantha? She's gone. Oh, she's coming.
Back over. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Samantha Deal. I'm the communications manager for Meridian Township, and I just wanted to thank you for allowing us to come introduce the home TV interns for spring 2023. So I have Mackenzie Decker. She was with us last semester too. I have Rachel Pearson. She's new this semester. Taya Wright and then Dominic Carroll are both new too. And then we also have Maggie Moulter. She is not here tonight. And then we have Denisha McDowell. Sorry. We have Denisha McDowell, our multimedia production and operations specialist, back in the control room. So she's controlling the cameras right now while we're out here. So yeah, just wanted to introduce them to you. You'll see them around this next semester, hopefully future semesters too.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the great work you'll put in for Meridian Township. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Item 4D is the Climate Sustainability Plan from the Environmental Commission. I believe Mr. Walsh? No.
You really want somebody who knows a lot, Mr. McConnell. Yeah, and Mr. Sarver.
You started moving. I wasn't sure what was happening.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Bill McConnell. I chair the Environmental Commission and moonlight on the Planning Commission and other things that keep me busy. Thanks for having us here tonight. We wanted to bring your attention to our efforts to revise our 2017 Climate Sustainability Plan. I've said this before, I'll say it again. When we did that back in 2017, there were a couple of parts of it that I felt were really, really ambitious. And I was delighted when the board adopted them. And I'm even more delighted that we're on progress to meet some of those really ambitious goals. I want to abuse my position here and give you a quick anecdote. I'm in a new work environment, and the other day some of my new colleagues were discussing the old saw, that Meridian Township residents never saw a millage that they wouldn't vote for, and how the taxes are higher than any place else. And one of these days, I really look forward to the opportunity to have that discussion with them about just exactly what it is that you're paying taxes for that you wouldn't like. Is it the funded pension liability? Is it the new fire trucks? Is it the parks? Is it the schools? What exactly is it in there that you are paying for that you would rather not? What I see in the township is, yes, we pay a fair amount of taxes. We get roads that are improving faster than anybody else's roads that are improving. We're getting financial stability. We're getting emergency service. We're getting a lot of great stuff. I say that in order to say what we're getting in terms of meeting our goals in the Climate Sustainability Plan is real. The most in some ways consequential part of the 2017 plan had to do with energy, which, as you know, is the way that we are going to mitigate the impact that we have on a changing climate. So by reducing the amount of energy we consume and by getting as much of it as we can from renewables, we're contributing less to the problems. The other sections of the plan are mainly about adapting to the changes that we've already set in motion. Bigger, stronger storms and all of those other climate impacts that we know are coming down the road. Tonight, what we have in your packet is a draft revision of the energy sections of the plan, because that's where we have the most activity and the most concrete goals. What we're hoping for is a little bit of feedback. Are we on the right track? The movement from 2017 has been to make the document more concise and to keep the same format and see what we've already accomplished and what we need to do more of. So ideally what we get back from you, as well as from hearing back from the Planning Commission, the Transportation Commission, and others who have a stake in these efforts, are we on the right track so that we can go ahead and revise the rest of the plan accordingly. What Zach has got up on the screen is a couple of cheat sheets that boil down what you have in your packet to a couple of sections. And what's up there right now is our renewable energy section, sort of top couple of bullets. And this is where I was saying the township made significant progress on 100% renewable energy for electricity for township operations by 2035. I thought that was really an outrageous goal, and we're actually, from installations here, the fire station, others in progress, done and planned, really on track to do that. Much as we got on track to fund pensions, much as we got on track to put up sirens, much as we got on track to raise our PASER ratings. We're on that track, and we hope we stay. You can see the installations, the municipal building, the fire station, marketplace on the green, et cetera. One of the things that's making us very successful in the township is collaboration, right? A lot of what I was just talking about with the renewable installations has been the township staff responding to the board's policy goals expressed by the community to increase our renewable energy. The second piece you see here is Solarized Workshops, which is outside of township operations and trying to help people who have taken the step to install solar on their homes to let their neighbors know what it was like. Let them know, why did you choose the system you chose? Have contractors there to answer those questions and hopefully to spread that. So you see a goal there of increasing the number of solar installations to 250. Well, it doesn't seem like a lot given the number of residents, but seeing as we were at less than 100 when we started this, that's already doubled. So those kinds of collaboration between the board setting policy, the staff implementing policy, and volunteers going out there and doing programming is how we're going to succeed. If you can go to the next page on the energy efficiency section. As you know, when I first started here in the township, this room was really loud, and it was either really cold or really warm. And now it's nice and comfy, and it's quiet. And not only is that more pleasant and helps us do our business, but we're also saving a lot of electricity by having that new system. And that was not a small investment that the township made. I'm seeing here most improved building greenhouse gas emissions intensity was the municipal building, 33% reduction. Public safety, 27% reduction. Those are not trivial figures. You know, when you're saving 10%, that you feel like you're saving a lot. When you're saving 33%, you're really saving a bunch. The last bullet on that slide is a DOE-funded center at Michigan State University that is providing services to continue assessing township buildings, facilities, for further opportunities for energy efficiency. And again, this speaks to partnership. This is federal government funding that's coming through Michigan State University and partnering with in-kind contributions of staff effort here at the township and volunteers to help connect to the commercial sector. So those kinds of partnerships and collaboration is how we're meeting our goals. If you have any questions on any of those issues, topics, John Sarver, who heads our energy team, is much more knowledgeable than me and is available now or at any time for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Board, do you have questions at this time? Thank you. We'll be back in touch. We'd like to mention also that Mr. Starver was in the 2021 was one of our volunteers of the year, and we'd like to thank you both for your work at the Environmental Commission and the Energy Team, and hope that you'll come back and talk with us at another time. Thank you. At this point, we come to item 5 on our agenda, and this is where citizens get to address agenda items or non-agenda items. I don't have any green cards, but if you would like to take a few minutes to speak to the board at this time, please do so. Give us your name and address and your comments.
Good evening to the board. Can you hear me just fine?
Yes.
Jamie Garmo, for the record, 400 South Old Woodward Avenue in Birmingham.
Okay.
So, good evening again. Thank you all for taking the time this evening. I commend you all for your community service. It's very hard after work to work again. I will be brief. I know you guys are going to have robust conversation in regards to the cannabis ordinance this evening. I just wanted to, again, thank you guys for taking this initiative and passing an ordinance for adult use, again, and furthering the cannabis industry here in Meridian Township. I represent one of the medical permit holders in the Jolly Oak Plaza. We've just had our permit reinstated and our building permit reinstated as well, and are in active construction. So we're hoping to get our certificate of occupancy in the next 8 to 12 weeks, give or take, depending how on inspections go. So we are hopeful that that coincides with the passing of an ordinance and issuance of a license so that we can get to working towards the goal of promoting a thriving business here, jobs, tax benefits, and all of that good stuff. So again, I'm brief, and I'm available for any questions in regards to cannabis industry, knowledge and know-how. I'm an attorney by trade, so please feel free.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Then we'll move to our next item, which is the Township Manager's Report. Mr. Walsh?
Thank you, Supervisor. The 2022 annual report has been completed. I know that you all have a copy of it. It'll be also posted today on our tomorrow on our website, and also a copy of it at our libraries, 2 libraries, and in the clerk's office. For anyone who'd like to take a look at the 2022 annual report, please go to our website. Update on the Okemos Bridge. You know, this is a county project, but we've been following it very, very closely. Today, there were approximately 25 crew people on the site and pouring the entrances to the bridge, especially on the south side, making very good progress. The weather's going to help a lot. We're still on target for 2 or 3 weeks away. Just so the public knows, we've been working on a renovation plan, as Mr. McConnell led right into this by talking what we used to be like, and this room has seen some improvements with carpet and painting. The rest of our building, the wallpaper's coming off. The carpet is dated and old and worn out, and in most places it's 50 years old and needs a real upgrade. We'll get more into this later, but we are going to be closing our facility for approximately 5 months this summer. This room will still be open. This room will serve the public. You'll be able to come in here and pay water bills, pay taxes, get building permits, all of that. We'll have 8 different departments in this room, 1 person for 4 departments, and then all of the treasurer's office. We'll also be relocated throughout 3 different sites. In addition to that, we're relocating 53 of our team members. More information to follow on that, but again, I want to start getting that out there. We expect that to take place around May 1st. The new signs, we've been talking about our new municipal signs. You'll start to see those go up here in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and they're really going to make an impact on the community. I'm sure the board's going to talk about in their comments about our DEI efforts, and I'll leave that to the board members who are part of that coming up. But some great things coming out of our DEI committee. Phase 1 underway for the Lake Lansing to MSU pathway. That'll go from Hagedorn at the Shaw area, music building, across. They'll have a bridge crossing the Red Cedar, and it'll go all the way over to Park Lake Road, and then phase 2 down to the interurban, and then out, and we'll actually have a path when we're finished, all paid for in cash, going from the Lake Lansing all the way to the university. Our audit is going to be underway soon. Director Gardner will oversee that. Police and fire wages. It's an issue that we need to address. When we reached a contract with our police and firefighter paramedics 3 years ago, it was a 2-year contract, 2% per year for 5 years. That is fails to meet where we need to be going forward in order to retain. I sat in on a session in Grand Rapids at our state conference last week about the growing difficulty of retaining paramedics and police officers, and it's getting more and more difficult. The task force that's been set up by the board for the Senior Community Center, they had their first meeting a week from today, and we'll kick off that. We've talked about the response, medical response down to Meridian Township. That continues to be an issue, but it's less of an issue for us because, as you know, the board came up with a very wise idea of placing an additional paramedic crew in the south part of the township. And they did that just a few weeks ago. And when you did that, what did you say? I hope we don't have something happen south of the bridge that's going to need a heavy presence. Think about the last 24 hours. The police building improvements, new locker rooms, and other improvements that are going on over there. In fact, the new canine, all those things will be coming forward. The former farmers market, you'll start to see Director Maisner and the Parks Commission work on plans for the pavilion out here, which used to be the farmers market. What will be the future use of that? We had some residents here earlier this evening that left. They thought that March 7th was the meeting that's going to take place March 7th, February 7th was tonight. And so I gave them some information, but again, 6 o'clock on March 7th in this room, a community conversation with the board, with the residents and the developers of the Village of Okemos. I'm sure that Director Clark may be talking to you about obviously the plans and move forward with the Village of Hazlet, something we've been working on for 10 to 15 years. Finally, the property's been sold. I want to point out the work of Director Clark and others who have been working on that for 15 years to bring us to where we are. The deer call, remember, we had 157 deer taken with our archery program, which is a very strong year. The DNR sanctions our firearm program that was conducted through Chief Plaga and the police department, and that was 200 tags through the DNRs for 357. We reached that mark 2 days ago. The deer call program for 2022 and 2023 is complete. I don't have the final venison number, but I believe it's going to approach 7,000 pounds of venison, and we'll have that information for you. I know that Trustee Wilson and her work with the food bank benefited greatly from that. I want to close with the most important thing we can talk about tonight, and that's the response this morning to Okemos High School. The call came in at 9:05. We were on scene very quickly. The first thought that occurred to me was just utter terror, something that in my 32-year career I have never felt. You know, we've been through an ice storm where people were without power for 11 days. We handled that. We had someone who had been violated by Larry Nassar that we missed. We handled that. We've been through a lot of difficult things. We had someone shooting on top of Chili's here 3 or 4 years ago. We worked through that. Today was different. Today was different. Because for anyone who has children at Okemos High School, today was 30 minutes of complete terror. The response from our police department and our paramedics and many other departments was just really, really outstanding. As we look back at it, and I'm sure they'll do a review of their response, but it was an incredible response. All the media reports on this are reporting about the response that we provided today. But one of the thoughts occurred to me is that people don't often think about the impact that people in this room have, or the 7 of you have. But think about that for a minute. Think about if that would have been an actual event this morning with victims. And the first call was there's 2 people critically wounded. And we're very thankful that it was a hoax. We wouldn't have done anything different than what we did today. We did what we needed to do, and we did it well. But think about the decision that all of you made. What did you do? When you knew it was going to cost approximately $40,000 to $60,000 to place an extra crew down in the south part of the township 2 weeks ago, what would that impact have been today with an extra crew down there of paramedics? So that one decision that you made us much more prepared for what happened today. None of us thought that we were going to have a major event like that to respond to, but you stepped out, all 7 of you. So I want to thank you for that decision you made, because even though it was 30 minutes of terror this morning, there was that one little sliver that said, we're better prepared today than what we would have been several months ago. And after the bridges open back up, we'll be much better prepared. But in closing, I just want to thank everyone that was involved today. We did the very best we could with communications. It's a very difficult situation because you don't know really what to say and when to say it and who should say it, because you've got the school system and all that. But yeah, I'm really proud of our team. I'm proud of the decision that you all made to make us safer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. With that, is Chief Blogger in the room?
No, Captain Grillo's here.
Oh, Captain Grillo. Would you come forward, please? I think I got a message today that was good news for the police department.
I believe so, yes. What was the message?
Would you, other than Mr. Walsh's comments about the accreditation decision
ma'am.
that was made today or announced today?
That's correct, yep.
Would you relay that to the?
Yeah, absolutely. Chief Palaga and I were on our way down to the Chiefs Conference that's being held at the Amway Grand in Grand Rapids. We're supposed to have our commission hearing for our 3-year renewal of our accreditation status. And we got about halfway there and we had to turn around. So I let the commission know that we weren't going to make it today. And they just, because of the extenuating circumstances, they normally would have us there to talk to us and ask us questions, but they understood that we weren't going to be able to make it, so they, without us being there, they approved our 3-year renewal of our accredited status. So,
Thank you.
yes, ma'am.
And congratulations.
Thank you, ma'am.
Next on our agenda is board member reports and of activities and announcements. Treasurer DeShane.
Thank you, Supervisor. Real briefly, the pension board met yesterday here in this room. The good news is that our employee pension, which has no active employees but has approximately 70 individuals eligible for pension benefits, 100% funded, and even with the difficult year last year was in the market, we are still in very good shape with that pension. And we do need more pension board members, and so there'll be additional pension board members coming before this board. We reviewed the information, but we could not take action last night because we lacked a quorum. Nonetheless, we got the information from our actuary and from our investment advisors, and that was a very good information on the status of our pension board. Secondly, the EDC meeting last Thursday with Trustee Sundlin, we met, and then last day attended the Chinese New Year celebration, which many of you were at, and Supervisor, you kicked that event off very nicely. The mall was packed with people. It was really great to see the great turnout for that event. 2 weeks ago, I attended the CAT Association, which is the Capital Area Treasurers Association, and our main issue we've identified in asking our state representatives to work on is to work on reforming the disabled veterans property tax exemption. We all support that. If you're 100% disabled, you get 100% exemption from your local property tax as a veteran. The problem with the state passed that law and they provided no funding for it. So depending on where you live and how many veterans live in your community, it can have a huge impact on your local tax revenue. And not just government, schools. Schools are taking the biggest hit on this. And so there appears to be some consensus to address it at the state level and for the state to fund this mandate that they enacted around 6 years ago. And lastly, regarding this morning, I did happen to see some of the press conference and Chief Plaga speaking. And the 2 things that came out of it, what he shared with the public was that every officer knew what to do immediately on scene. There was no hesitation. They knew what to do. They had practiced this, and they were there. And the second was the coordination of law enforcement agencies. There were a dozen or more law enforcement agencies, and they all knew their role as well as to what to do. And that was very reassuring to know that everyone knew their role. And he mentioned that of course, as you can imagine, many hundreds of cars are converging on that scene at the same time, that our fire department handled the influx of law enforcement and families that were there, as all of us would have been there if we had a child there, to manage that traffic and kept that from becoming chaotic. So thank you for the fire chief as well. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Other board members? Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I just wanted to add to what Treasurer DeShane said, and know that we acknowledge as a board that this has been a very difficult day in Meridian Township, and specifically for Okemos high school parents, students, and faculty. I think that Manager Walsh did an excellent job of summarizing the great work, the great response that our police department and our emergency services had to this unfortunate hoax that was happening across the state. We're lucky today. We're very lucky today as a community, and I think we have to acknowledge that, but also remain vigilant because we may not be so lucky next time. And we have our police department and our emergency services teams' readiness and their recertification, which we just heard about as comforts. But, I think that, there's more that we can do. There's more that we can ask our friends like Representative Sinoglu in the legislature to assist us with. And I hope to have more on that in the coming weeks. This is the time that we should be looking at finding a way to address in state law ways to make our community and our schools safer. And I think that, while much of this is not in our hands to do directly, we can encourage our lawmakers through action by this board to do so at their level. So I hope to have something on that in the coming days, and hopefully we'll have that in the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other board members? Trustee Mazinski.
Thank you, Supervisor. Would you like me to chat about DEI a little bit as well?
Sure.
I'll start with our diversity, equity, and inclusion work group that Manager Walsh had mentioned. We've got a lot of momentum going. We've got fantastic staff in our lead staff, Abby Tioff, Director Tioff, who has so much passion for this and has really helped us in directing us towards our mission and our action statements. We've really got some momentum. We're working internally, been working for a long time on internal policies and procedures, hiring, other workforce type of improvements. But we're also now looking to move forward to public facing and more inclusion into our community and looking for input and/or I guess action from our community as well. We're really excited. We did settle on 2 mission statement or action items. One is to continue our internal work to ensure that we have a equitable and diverse work group, but also looking to have our first Pride celebration this year. We're looking at August, end of August, and working with staff, specifically Mr. Shorkey, who's been giving us a lot of information, who has worked in Lansing and some in East Lansing in the past on this particular issue. So we're very excited about that. We are still working internally, but we're looking to have external input eventually, and we'll be reaching out. Prior to that, if you have any input, you can reach out to any of us, and we'll make sure that is heard. So that's very exciting. I think I'm getting old. I think other than that, I may have missed a couple things, but it has been an emotional day today. I did want to just thank the Environmental Commission. Even though we did not have quorum at our last meeting, you can see that they're working hard, and doesn't take a meeting to get all that work done. So we appreciate them, especially on our energy portion of that climate sustainability plan. Last but not least, I am a parent of 2 Okemos High School students and was present on site today. As a parent, it was terrifying. As a community leader, it was terrifying. And it was amazing the amount of children, first, that came out of that school, and I watched every single one of them come out, and just the fear amongst them, but knowing that there was police presence all the way from the school to the football field, and on the football field, they remained feeling safe and confident. I think Manager Walsh, you may have mentioned, but there was multiple units on site, including FBI and ATF, and just the fact and how they were all working together and everybody knew where to be. It was really comforting, given that situation. I do want to just, I have a lot of course, my kids have a lot of friends the same age, and so I had a lot of parents that were reaching out. I was in parking lots where people were very upset and trying to communicate. Like you said, it's difficult to communicate, but giving that information that our police is on site, our fire department's on site, that they're working the best that they can. So I just want to thank all of our emergency responders. There was communities from all over, so I just want to reach out to all of our surrounding communities. That's what makes Mid-Michigan so fantastic. We saw that in Nob Hill with our apartment fire, but we saw it again today. Another thing that was notable that I noticed was they pulled buses there was buses all the way from Lansing to get those kiddos from Okemos High School to the pickup location at 242. I heard bus drivers talking. They felt that this was like they were, just felt very, I don't want to say excited, that's not the word, but very honored to be able to help their community. And so I thought that was another just exemplary part of that tragedy that ended up in a positive note. I agree, there's, you can practice. I've been in a third grade class where they practice this type of drill. You can practice and practice until it happens. You just don't know what to expect. So of course there's lessons learned, but we're, so grateful to have an accredited police department. We've got an emergency plan from our fire department, and it worked. Always improvement, process improvement's imperative, but I just want to thank everybody. I want the school faculty, the staff, the volunteers. They were all fantastic. They were all there. They were calm. They were comforting. So I just want to reach out to the residents and let them know there was a lot of emotions, and there's probably going to be a lot of emotions, and that we're here to listen and to take any of that comment and bring it back to whomever we need to. So again, thank you. My heart goes out to all the faculty, all the staff, all the volunteers, the parents, the students, and the remainder of the community. It's scary, but so that's it. Thank you, Supervisor.
Thank you, well said. Are there other comments? Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Thank you, Trustee Wazinski, for sharing that heartfelt message to our community. I really appreciate that. It's difficult situation, tough to get through. I too want to commend our emergency services team, our law enforcement, the school districts, 242 Church, once again stepping up for protecting our community, and our township manager for his swift communication with the community. It's unbelievable, the rumors that go on social media and Twitter and Nextdoor and Facebook and with almost anything that a community does, and some of the things my husband and I were reading, and just blows my mind how people make stuff up. So I'm, especially with a communications background, I'm really proud of the way in which Meridian Township responded with a message to the community about what was happening, to get ahead of some of those rumors, try to, stifle that down and let people know what was really happening. In addition, I did contact our state rep, Julie Brixey, about gun safety. I contacted her this morning, and I have spoken to legislators on behalf of Moms Demand Action. And once again, I went on after our conversation and filled out a Moms Demand Action form. So if anybody's interested in taking part and reaching out to our legislators, that group does a lot of work with gun safety and reaching out to our state legislators. So that is one way in which our community can work with them on safer gun laws. Also, I spoke with our state rep Julie Brixey about speaking at our Pride event on August 26th, and she has agreed to speak at it, so I'm excited about that. And if you know Bob Hoffman, he's going to be the MC for that event, so I'm excited about that as well. He's both fantastic people in our community. We had other things that I was part of. Phil already mentioned the pension board. We didn't have a quorum, but when we get that rescheduled, we will put that information out to the public and notify them. I attended a Capital Area Municipal Clerks Association meeting. Basically, they gave us an update about Proposal 2. I won't reiterate because I think our state rep talked about that. Basically, we're just kind of waiting on clarification from the Bureau of Elections and training from them. Also attended a Zoom meeting from the Cannabis Regulatory Agency and Municipal Summit. There was almost 300 people attended that Zoom from across the state. There were a lot of unanswered questions that many municipalities had in regards to laws, rules, financial reporting obligations, whether or not they're being reporting accurately or not. So I think I left with more questions than when I went to that. Also, we had the post-election audit was conducted on January 27th. We are waiting the final official results. When we get those, we will report those. We also had a test done of our adjudication system and found that the adjudicator is performing as expected and reporting accurately. So I'm very happy about that news. And then finally, just a few announcements. There's a new restaurant, Valley Wings on Jolly Road in Okemos, on the same strip as Cancun, what is that called? Cancun Grill? Cancun
Grill. Yeah.
Cancun Grill, yes, on the same, on Jolly. So it seems to be super popular. That place was packed. President's Day is February 20th, so township offices will be closed in observance of that. And then on Thursday, February 16th at 11 a.m., we'll be swearing in some firefighters. So the public is welcome to attend. That's my report.
Thank you. Anyone else? Trustee Sunderland.
Yeah, okay, well, I would just like to add on to Treasurer DeShane's report that I attended the Economic Development Corporation meeting on February 2nd, and March is Women in Business Month. They're having a little program on March 10th for women in business to support them, and they're going to do a little do-it-yourself drywall series, and it'll be something interesting for women to attend. And also working on a small business recognition and promotional program. So that's what I want to report for the Economic Development Corporation.
Okay. Anyone else? Well, let's see. I've been busy as well. On the 1st of February, I joined staff for a meeting with the Union County Road Department, and we talked about the local road program for 2023. There were some pleasantly received news in that respect. I also attended, I believe on the 2nd, the Neighborhood Leaders Program led by Captain Garillo. And if there are, I would say if there are members of the community who do not know about this program, to check the website of the police department. And you'll find that these meetings are held, I believe, quarterly. And it's an opportunity for leaders of different neighborhoods and communities to come together and meet with the police department and review the events that are occurring in their department and get advice, learn new information about law enforcement in our area. The last meeting had a presentation from the dispatchers at 911 and had other information about how the community can keep up with the kinds of things that are happening around them in the area and in the region. As Trustee Brzezinski mentioned, attended the DEI task force meeting, and on Monday of this week, attended the Downtown Development Authority meeting, and like several others that have been mentioned here, for some reason, we didn't have a quorum either. So, but certainly in that group, like many others, our residents are anxious and anticipating the March 7 meeting for a discussion about the development in downtown Okemos. I believe that's all for today. And if there's nothing else, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Treasurer DeShane.
I move the agenda be approved as presented.
Support. Supported by Trustee Wilson. No discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Then we'll move on to item 9, which is the consent agenda. On the consent agenda is our usual communications, minutes of our January 24 regular board meeting, the manager's bills. There's also a item D, where the required 2022 Planning Commission annual report is made a part of our agenda, and I believe we merely accept that. Item E is ratification of new full-time EMT and firefighter appointments, as mentioned by Clerk Guthrie. Item F is a charitable gaming license for the 501c You Got This project. Item G is a request for a public hearing on February the 21st for the Hazard Village Square Commercial Rehabilitation Act exemption certificate. So they're asking us for permission to have a public hearing on February 21st, 2023. And item H is the Treasurer's Investment Report, fourth quarter 2022. Trustee Wilson.
Before we take action on this, I'd like to ask about item H, which is the Treasurer's Investment Report. There's a significant increase in earnings, and Treasurer DeShane, could you tell us a little bit more about that?
I'd be glad to. Thank you, Trustee Wilson. Yeah, we reached $781,000 in investment earnings last year, which was up 145% from the previous year. This is great news. This is money that goes into our general fund, allows us to pay for more roads or whatever wherever we come up short in other areas. There's really 3 reasons for that. The first is the Federal Reserve, which has raised interest rates from 3.5% a year ago to 7.75%. And we all know that reason they're doing that is they're trying to tamp down inflation. Inflation is up over 8%, and the way to reduce demand, slow the economy down, and push back inflation is to raise interest rates. So we have very high interest rates. It's not great for home builders right now or car dealers because consumers are paying higher rates than they have in a long time. But we are able to benefit from those higher rates. As a result of that, we've moved a higher percentage of our township's reserve funds from non-fixed or liquid to fixed investments. If you look on page 72 of your packet, you'll see we're at 74% of our investments are now in fixed investments. The reason I've done that is we've had high rates before and high returns on our reserves, and then the economy comes back, or the rates fall back down, and our revenue falls with it. I'm trying to level this out so that we can consistently count on a much higher return on our investments. And these aren't investments in equities or stocks. These are investments in CDs, money market, and treasuries, the most safe investments possible. We're not playing the market with this money. This is very safe money. And the third reason we've got this higher return, and I look back, I think it's been at least since 2008 that we've had this kind of a return on our investments, is the excellent financial shape of the township. And that's due to staff and Manager Walsh. We all know that he keeps a very tight control over the budget and expenditures, and it's no accident that this is his 10th year, and our reserves and our pre-funding of major projects is at the highest level it's been in recent history. So those three things together have given us great returns. So thank you for that chance to discuss that.
Thank you.
Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I move the consent agenda as presented.
Support.
Supported by Trustee Wazinski. We need a roll call vote, Mr. Lemaster.
Supervisor Jackson?
Yes.
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 Trustee Hendrickson?
Yes.
Trustee Sundland?
Yes.
Trustee Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Thank you. We have no questions for the attorney at this time. We have no public hearings, and so we'll move to item 12, action items. 12A is set a date for a study session. The suggested date is February 28th, 2023. Trustee Wilson.
Move to approve a Township Board study session on February 28th, 2023 at 6 p.m. in the Township Municipal Building in the Town Hall Room.
Support.
Trustee Wilson, you have any further comments?
The purpose of this particular motion is that we can study our sign ordinance. When the sign ordinance came before us about 4 weeks ago, we were pretty overwhelmed with the changes because it's a total revamp of this ordinance. So we all agreed that it needed further study. So this will give us an opportunity without anything else on the agenda to tackle this issue.
Did you have your hand? I'm sorry, Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I just wanted to clarify that the sign ordinance is all that we intend to take up at this study session. The packet I noted had information on their redevelopment ready community designation, and it's my guess that the staff may not be prepared yet to answer some of the questions we had from that last meeting by the February 28th. I don't know if they're willing to say that or not, but I would be happy to have it just relating to the sign ordinance, since there seemed to be plenty of material from that change alone.
Mr. Walsh.
The agenda is totally up to you, but to give you the information, we will be ready to discuss both if you choose to do so. The reason we suggested both or put that on there was from that meeting that night, that was the discussion of the board, is that we really need to take a look at both of these. But to the trustee Henderson's point, the sign ordinance could and probably will take up the entire evening. So it's up to you. Just let us know what your agenda is and we will follow that direction.
Okay. Comments, further comments? Mr. DeShane.
I like the idea of keeping it to one topic. We've done study sessions in the past, and if we've got one topic, we tend to drill down and really study that well. If we have a second topic, it's always in the background, like we need to keep this short to get to the second topic. I think that the RRC recertification, if we choose to go that route, could easily take up its own study session. That is going to impact our zoning ordinance in a major way. And it's worth certainly a lot of board time to discuss that in whatever format it is. So I would support Trustee Henderson's notion that we should keep this just to the sign ordinance discussion. It's a huge ordinance, and it's going to impact the township in countless ways. We'll need those 2 hours that we've set aside for it. Thank you.
Okay. Did you have your hand? You didn't have your hand. Okay, I have one question. Mr. Walsh, this is a study session that's scheduled for on the 28th, which is a regular board meeting date.
Yep.
This is a separate from the board meeting date. So start at 6 o'clock?
Correct.
Okay. No? So I presume I need a motion to, did you?
You have the motion before you. We're ready.
I had it seconded as well, didn't I?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Lemaster, you have all of that, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, the question is, to approve the study session on February the 28th at 6 o'clock. All in favor of the motion, please say yes.
Yes.
Month?
Support.
Clerk Guthrie?
Thank you. I do have one friendly amendment where it says, whereas Milton L. Scales was the first African-American elected to the Township Board in 2012. He served from 2012 to 2016. I think we should add that he was appointed to the Planning Commission in 2023. So I just have a friendly addition to add to this Black History Month resolution.
That would be a, Mr. Wall?
Yeah, just information only that if you're going to do that, you might want to consider, if you're going to do his totality of service, he served on the Planning Commission prior to becoming a trustee in 2012. So he's Planning Commissioner twice if you wanted to include that. I don't have the exact years in front of me of when he was a trustee prior to that.
Right.
Yeah, I would like a friendly amendment to include his Planning Commission service and Supervisor Jackson's service as well.
All right. That would be a motion to amend the resolution.
Yes.
And support?
Supported by Mr. DeShane. All in favor of the motion to make those amendments to the resolution, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Then we move forward. Now, Mr. DeShane.
I think this resolution is worth reading, and if the clerk who made the motion would be willing to read it, I think that would be excellent. If not, I'd be glad to read it.
All right. Thank you. Do I start? I've never read a resolution. Do I start right here at a regular meeting of the Township Board? Or do I start whereas? All right. Whereas Meridian Township acknowledges the contributions of African Americans to the history of the United States, and that all people of the United States benefit from the inclusion of African American contributions to U.S. history. And whereas in February, Meridian Township recognizes Black History Month as an opportunity to reflect on the contributions of Black history to township history, Michigan history, and U.S. history. And whereas Meridian Township encourages learning from the past in order to understand and improve the experiences that shape the United States. And whereas African Americans engage and serve the United States at all levels of American life, including government, military, academia, and industry. And whereas during Black History Month, Meridian Township acknowledges and commemorates the importance of African American citizenship, engagement, and resilience. And whereas in Meridian Township, Gilbert Sherman was the first African American to serve on the Township Board, appointed Township Treasurer in 1999. In 2000, Gilbert Sherman was the first African American to run for the office of Treasurer and thus for a Township Board seat. And whereas Milton L. Scales was the first African American elected to the Township Board in 2012, he served from 2012 to 2016. And whereas since 2015, the Meridian Township Board has adopted a recurring commitment to increase diversity in all aspects of township function, and specifically in its board goals and objectives. And whereas in November 2016, Patricia Herring Jackson became the first African-American female elected to the Township Board as a trustee. And whereas in 2021, the federal government declared Juneteenth a National Independence Day, a federal holiday for us all, and Meridian Township began hosting community celebrations to bring awareness of the holiday and its importance to honor the true end of slavery in America. And whereas in February 2022, Patricia Herring Jackson was the first African-American female appointed to the Township Board as supervisor, and in November 2022, she was elected to serve as Township Supervisor. Now therefore be it resolved by the Township Board of the Charter Township of Meridian, Ingham County, Michigan, that Meridian Township commemorates Black History Month to pay tribute to the generations of African Americans who struggled with adversity and to celebrate the accomplishments, contributions, and history of African Americans.
Thank you. And so the motion is to approve the resolution commemorating Black History Month as amended, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Lamaster, as a resolution, can we do a roll call vote?
We can, you can do a voice vote as well, whichever you'd like.
We'll do a voice vote then. All in favor of the motion to approve the resolution as amended, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Chair votes yes, and the resolution passes. Next on our agenda is board and commission appointments. You have in your packet two vacancy, the possibility of two vacancies to fill, one on the Environmental Commission and the other on the, as a board-supported representative to the Board of Directors of CATA. Someone like to, Mr. Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I move to approve the appointment of Graham Dietrich to the Environmental Commission for a term ending 12/31/25.
Support.
Supported by Trustee Wazinski. Mr. Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I think Graham is an excellent candidate for this commission vacancy. He previously was a candidate for the 13th County Commission District and seems to have a passion for environmental issues. I think he'll be a perfect fit.
Okay. Trustee Wazinski.
I would concur with Trustee Hendrickson. And again, as always, we're so very excited and happy that we have our residents serving on these boards and commissions.
Thank you. Further comments? So the, all in favor of the motion to approve the appointment of Graham Dietrich to the Environmental Commission for a term ending 12/31/2025, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. The chair votes yes, and Mr. Dietrich has been appointed or approved for appointment. Trustee Wilson.
You have an additional appointment, and I'd like to read that motion.
Okay.
Move that Phyllis Vaughn be approved as representative to the CATA Board of Directors to fill a vacancy for the term ending September 20th, 2025.
Support.
Supported by Ms. Treasurer DeShane. Trustee Wilson?
I have met Phyllis Vaughn. She's a very active community member at Grange Acres. She's also a good user of the CATA system and knows it quite well. So I think this is an excellent choice to add her as our representative to CATA.
And Mr. DeShane.
Ms. Vaughn has also served briefly on our Transportation Commission, and as Trustee Wilson pointed out, is a super user of CATA. She's one of our residents that we help, that relies almost entirely on CATA for transportation needs, and she'll be a good advocate for those that use CATA the most on the CATA board. It is worth noting that this appointment has come to be because of the untimely passing of Robin Lewis, who passed away in December, and we all miss Robin greatly, and yet I believe that Phyllis will do a very good job of filling the shoes that Robin served in that board for 2 years.
Thank you. So the motion is to appoint Phyllis Vaughn as representative to the CATA Board of Directors for a term ending September 20, 2025. All in favor of the motion, please say yes.
Yes.
Vote no. Chair votes yes, and the motion passes. We now move to item 13 on our agenda. The 13A is ordinance 2023-01, rezone 1642 Lake Court from zoning category of RB to RCC with a conditional rezoning agreement. Mr. Schmidt, Director Schmidt.
Supervisor Jackson, thank you. The request in front of you this evening, apparently I was talking to Sam too much, is to rezone the properties located directly to the west of Cheesy D's, which are on the screen here. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so you can see the broader context. This is Marsh Road. This is Lake Lansing running through the middle of the screen. Lake Court is actually a small dirt road located just to the south of Cheesy D's, which is located right here. Lake Lansing itself would be just to the north and east here. So the applicants have purchased, this is an old aerial photo because it still shows the 5 houses. They've purchased the entirety of this land, which was previously 11 separate parcels that were all predated our ordinance, but theoretically could all be built on because they were valid parcels at the time of the establishment of the ordinance. So what they're requesting is rezoning of this property, which is also split zoned, I should point out. This area adjacent to Cheesy D's is zoned C1 commercial. The remainder is zoned RB, one family high density residential. The request in front of you is to rezone the entirety of the property to RCC, multifamily residential, with a limitation of no more than 12 units to be built on the property. They are essentially looking at doing a series of duplexes on the property. Obviously still has to go through the full process. All we're at this point is the conditional rezoning request to limit it to 12. The Planning Commission did review this, held a public hearing on the matter, and did vote to recommend approval. They raised no major concerns. Largely, they're looking at this, the Planning Commission looked at this as an infill opportunity, obviously, given that it's older housing that has certainly outlived its usefulness, given that they have been demolished. That is adjacent to commercial and high-density residential to the south. So it is a bit of a transitional property, but it's a good redevelopment opportunity because it is near commercial, it is near recreation, it is near transit lines. So this is where you want to see infill potential development. The rezoning would allow for the redevelopment of the properties in conformance with our ordinance, whereas none of the previous properties met the standards of the modern standards of the zoning code, and the rezoning is not substantially denser than what was there before, given that they are proposing 12 units and there were 11 lots that could have been built on. So that is what I have for you this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is here as well to speak further to the application.
Thank you. Board members, Trustee Wilson.
So I noted, Mr. Schmidt, that the address that's cited is 1642. What is the location of 1642?
So 1642 is the new address of the parcel that was created. So this was originally 11 parcels.
Okay.
Through some complicated machinations of the soil erosion enabling legislation, they had to combine them all up into one parcel before they were able to get a soil erosion permit to start demolition. And so once they got a new parcel, they got a new address as well. So that is the address you find. You will not find 1642 anywhere other than this report.
That's what troubled me. Thank you.
Treasurer DeShane.
This redevelopment, I think, will be very welcomed by the neighbors. Have we gotten any feedback from the neighbors on this redevelopment?
Officially, the neighbors directly adjacent were glad to see something done with the houses. Unofficially, my friends that live in the neighborhood are happy to see something done in the houses as well.
If you walk that street anytime in the past 20 years, you would find some of the most decrepit housing in the township. So this is really excellent that this is being redeveloped in this way. Do we know, the applicant here, maybe they can answer the question as to what the market segment this housing will be built for?
Would you mind repeating that question, please?
What is your target market for who you see renting from this 12-unit property in terms of the amenities that we've provided? We've got lots of housing in the south township that starts at about $1,500 a month and goes up from there. And I'm hoping this is something more affordable than that.
We're actually planning on.
Excuse me, before you answer, could you identify yourself and give us your address?
Absolutely. My name is Dominic Lee.
I'm Scott Wheaton.
Our address is 2419 Science Parkway. We're planning on renting the units at market rent. I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know what the market rent will be once they're up and running. But currently, you kind of nailed it. It's between 1,600 and 2,200 in that area. It kind of varies vastly over there.
And as far as, who might be interested, obviously with location within the township, there's a lot of exciting stuff to do and opportunities for public transit, things like that. So we can see a wide array of people who would be interested in this, from an older crowd that is looking to be around, things that they want to do, to also the younger crowds more in our age group, so.
It's kitty corner from the Lake Lansing Park South. It's an excellent location. Our previous planning director, Christopher Buck, talked about creating an avenue between Hazlet Road and Marsh Road leading to the park. And we also did a study back then finding that there was a significant housing shortage in the Hazlet, that portion of Hazlet. So you're definitely going to hit the right market here with the new development. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Yes. Other comments? Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. To me, this is not an objectionable rezoning. We're going to end up with more or less the same number of units and properties that we had theoretically prior to in the current zoning. I think that it is positive to remove some blighted buildings and replace them with better new development. And I think that this will also help to sort of provide a transition from the commercial areas, as Director Schmidt pointed out, to the more residential areas to the west. So I'll be supportive of this rezoning when it comes up in a couple of weeks, barring some new information.
Okay. Trustee Sandal? No comments? Trustee Wozinski.
Thank you, Supervisor. I have one question. I'm not sure if it's for our potential developers or Director Schmidt, but when we say 12 units, that mean, and you mentioned duplexes, so is that?
6 duplexes.
6 duplexes,
Yes,
two units per duplex. Thank you. I also agree this is, I would like to see more affordable housing, but this is a great location for that. Again, like Director Schmidt said, it's infilling some dilapidated areas already. I think it's going to increase the walkability, given that the park is right there. You do have Cheesy D's, you have other restaurants and other commercial businesses there too. So I also am in support of the rezoning.
Anyone else? Oh, Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. Director Schmidt, I noticed some of the questions at the Planning Commission level were about setbacks. These units were to be able to meet setback requirements, and our staffer, Brian Shorkey, responded that it could be planned unit, come across as a planned unit development. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, engineer is still looking into exactly how this is going to come through our development process, whether it's a planned unit development, whether it comes through as a straight site plan, but ultimately they will have to meet the requirements in the ordinance one way or another. It's just a matter of which development path the engineer determines is the best approach for them.
Okay, and then will there be changes to that road, that Lake Court?
That is something the Ingham County Road Department is going to have to weigh in on, given that they do control the right-of-way. One of the development team's next steps is going to be to sit down with the Drain Commissioner's Office and the Road Department with a concept plan and start working through the issues there. That would be our strong encouragement.
Cheesy D's is not part of this.
At this time, Cheesy D's is not part of the project.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we know yet whether the address will be Lake Court or?
Lake Lansing?
Lake Lansing, yes.
For a project like this, if they go to duplexes, it's likely that each unit will get its own address. So it'll probably be 6 Lake Court addresses and 6 Lake Lansing addresses.
I see. Okay. And my only other question, I too find this an exciting opportunity for infill development, and an exciting idea for doing that. When you build a duplex, is that one dwelling unit or two dwelling units?
A duplex is considered two dwelling units.
Two dwelling units.
Because they are separated and it's two separate groups of people living in one building.
Okay, okay. Well, I think the, oh, yeah, sure.
So can I ask Tim if there's going to be exits onto Lake Lansing Road, will that be controlled with one curb cut?
That is something that the road department is going to have to weigh in on.
Yeah, 'cause
We
that's-
expect that it will certainly be reduced from the current situation where I think there was 3 or 4 curb cuts.
It's a bad corner.
Whether it's 1 or 2 is to be determined.
Okay.
With no further questions, I think the consensus is that we are generally in favor and expect to see this rezoning request come back to me and come back to us soon.
We will have it on the next meeting for introduction.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 13B is recreational marijuana ordinance. And that too will involve Director Schmidt explaining to us what the Planning Commission has sent to us.
Yes, and I have brought in the big guns tonight as well. Township Attorney Kushel is here. So this is functionally a 3-part proposal that is in front of you this evening for discussion. The Township Board's direction was to begin working on a plan for implementation here. One of those pieces, and the sort of starting off piece, was the zoning ordinance amendment. That was referred to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission has reviewed the proposal and has recommended back to the board a positive recommendation. So the zoning ordinance would the zoning ordinance would utilize the existing structure we have in the ordinance. We didn't want to recreate the wheel here. It would remove the references to medical marijuana. It would remove the overlay area on Towner Road and the overlay on Dawn Avenue, because those were large. The Towner Road one was a difficult site to develop and to begin with. The Dawn Avenue, from Director Clark and my staff's perspective, we did not want to put ourselves in a position where we had a new user potentially coming into our limited industrial area and driving up the price and potentially driving out the other users. We had also gotten no interest for it by and large, so it was an easy removal. 2 of the other overlays were reduced slightly, just to more properly engage with the actual buildings on the ground. So the east or west Grand River site, obviously the Red Cedar Manor development that was recently built in Red Cedar Flats, that was removed from the overlay. There's obviously, it's a residential development. There's not going to be anything there. We also removed properties from the Jolly and Okemos overlay because, again, new hotel, new car dealership, things like that were built that obviously weren't ever going to convert to a dispensary operation. And lastly, the Planning Commission recommended and staff included prohibition on drive-through uses and a 2,000-foot buffer from any other licensed premise. So the next piece is the smallest of the pieces, and that is the modifications to the medical licensing to just bring it into sort of compliance with these changes. So removing all of the other uses that are no longer going to be in the ordinance based on these changes. The big piece, and what Mr. Kushel is here to discuss, is the recreational licensing piece. So I'll turn it over to him for that part.
Thank you, Tim. Good evening, board members. So piggybacking and starting right where Tim left off, looking at the draft recreational marijuana establishments ordinance, we have a definition section that utilizes the reserved portion of Chapter 40 to just set definitions for the group as a whole. So trying to consolidate and keep things concise. Then your first operative section is going to come on page 4. So we're creating a new article in that chapter, which would then permit and regulate recreational marijuana. At the end of this draft ordinance is where you see the repealer section, which repeals Article 3, which is the current prohibition on recreational marijuana. So we create a new Article 4 and then establish, right, the first big question is, what do we want to see? Municipalities have authority to set a limit on establishments and also to opt in, essentially, the types of establishments they want to see. What we've sort of provided here as a starting point for discussion are retailers and growers, which is mostly of the interest we saw in the medical side and what we've heard from applicants. In the memo, you'll also see the notation to micro businesses, which is something that's available on this recreational side, not in a medical context. Happy to discuss that further with the board. And I'm just going to hit some highlights and then happy to come back to details for you. On page 5, just noting that the permit here would be an annual permit, so it would go to 12/31, which is slightly different than how we have it now. No transfers currently drafted into this ordinance, which is more consistent with what we currently have on your medical side, but we've worked with clients on both sides of that. There's a range of opinions on how and whether, if you have one applicant who's awarded a permit, they want to bring in an investor or something, how that transfer would come into play. We've had some discussions with staff, but at this level, we didn't draft any language. Happy to get feedback from the board on those provisions. Moving on to page 6, the application process. So the actual application contents themselves are very much the same to what you have in your medical ordinance. But the application process will be substantially different from what is in the medical. And that's driven by state law because we utilized the lottery before for awarding the medical applications and the medical permits. You cannot use a lottery if you have multiple applications in a recreational context. So again, the applications still come to the community planning and development directors. We've left it in the same administrative location, but then this board would open application windows. So when the township is ready to accept applications, rather than having a window that opens every year, this board would make a motion to open that window and accept applications. At the same time, there's several references throughout the ordinance to procedures and standards, which is also a separate document in this draft that this board would create. It would be an administrative document, and that would guide how the Community Planning and Development Office would process those applications and also the critical competitive review factors, how the applications are going to be scored. So a lot of the nuts and bolts, the very detailed work of moving through those applications would be created by this board outside the ordinance. So it gives you a little more flexibility in terms of bringing in new criteria or jettison criteria that's no longer relevant or not working, while still giving that direction and policy to staff to implement. And then, like I said, the same application contents, it's very similar. And there were a few changes that we took out from the medical side, which we anticipate would be more appropriate in a competitive review context. So how the board rates the applicants, who would be what qualities are important to consider whether they should operate in this township, are all competitive review factors. So a lot of those kinds of discussions would be coming later or separate from the ordinance. Then moving to page 9, approval of the applications drafted to have then, once they're scoring, the applications would come to this board. Now, and how that scoring happens, like I mentioned, that's all in the procedures and guidelines. So how much staff does, how much this board does, are all things that can be set up in those standards. Then page 10 has your competitive review guardrails. Again, go to the procedures and standards, but does note that it would be a public hearing, which is typically how we've seen communities implement their competitive review. We've had some case law come out, actually on both sides. One community did not use a public hearing, another community did have a public hearing, and the Court of Appeals upheld both of those procedures that those communities used. So depending on how the township implements them, we can tailor the procedural approach to match the policy goals of this board. Then on page 11, we have an appeal provision. So if there is a concern from an applicant from that initial scoring, we have an initial appeal here within the township to help provide some effective, quick remedy to look at something very quickly without having to get into litigation, and hopefully ensure that everyone, is treated fairly and feels and knows that they've been heard by the board. Then your next section is on renewal applications, which this is a bit of a departure from the medical context. Well, sort of not really, because in the medical context, you had the lotteries awarded and then they just sort of automatically renewed because they were a lottery selected. But since we're not using the lottery piece to still kind of mirror that approach, what we've done is vest the renewals in a staff procedures. That's how we've contemplated it, that if I am selected in competitive review to operate a retailer establishment, and then, I put up my building and I get it open, and then I come in for renewal and I say, hey, Tim, I'm going to do everything just the way I said I was going to do it last year when I had that great application. Well, there's no reason to deny that renewal because I'm operating consistent with what I said before, and I kept my promises, put my building up and open my doors. So then you're going to renew that applicant. That's something easy that staff can do. But then on the next page, page 12, going through that issuance, if there was a problem with my application, if I couldn't complete some promise or there was an issue with how I'm renewing, or maybe I'm changing some material aspect of my application, it contemplates a major minor amendments, which is also the procedure we use with our special use permits and some other administrative materials in the township. So again, with guidance from the procedures and standards, that would help Tim make the decision. Is this a major amendment? Is this a minor amendment? What Matt's doing with his location here. If there's some major changes, then perhaps we need to come back to the board to get approval of that renewal. So again, that's a structure we sort of contemplated here, but again, very open, of course, to your comments on how you want to see that policy go. And it is worth noting, if this board wants to see every renewal application and see that material and make sure, that it is the same, they're operating consistent with what they submitted, you can do that. You can have that be a board decision to renew or not renew, rather than utilizing the administrative process. Again, no transfer applications, just highlighting that again. And then the operational standards are very consistent with what we have in the medical side. I will note one question we did receive, so I'll just highlight it, is we do have sign restrictions limiting the content of what they can say on those signs. You can't say marijuana, can't say cannabis, which normally, as you'll go through in your study session, we don't do, right? Get away from content. But again, marijuana is very special, and it is still prohibited at the federal level, and we believe there are very good reasons to limit that advertising. We've utilized these types of provisions in other communities. We're not aware of any challenges to it at this time. So we think that's good. And then also, again, implementing the no drive-through, no curbside service, which was something the state regulator sort of permitted in their rules. But again, we want, the draft here would have a policy decision that these transactions should occur within the building, and we shouldn't have any transactions occurring outside the building. And then page 16, your penalties. So this is a difference from your medical ordinance, also driven by state law. MRMA violations, recreational marijuana violations, are limited to a civil infraction at $500 rather than the scaled, stepped, multi-tiered fine provision we have on the medical side. So that's the most we can put in there by statute as a violation of this ordinance. But we have two actions that we can really take against someone who's really a bad actor. Well, one, they're going to have the state potentially coming involved, and we've seen now the CRA, the Cannabis Regulatory Agency, used to be the MRA, the Marijuana Regulatory Agency. They've actually suspended a few state licenses and shut down a few operators who were not able to operate consistent with state law. So you always have that in your back pocket for one, if it's a really bad actor. And secondly, at the local level, every day that a violation continues, if there's some ongoing problem, let's say they're doing curbside service, right? Well, we can write multiple tickets for that, and $500 is going to add up if you're writing them every day. And then secondly, there's denial, revocation. We can deny renewal because if they have a history of failure to operate in compliance with the ordinance, or if it's extremely serious, like the state, we could move for revocation proceedings. So even though there's a difference here in the remedy and enforcement, I do believe that we've done what we can to vest this board with sufficient teeth to enforce what is a very important regulatory ordinance. And then the repeal there at the end for the previous prohibition.
So I just want to circle back to sort of where we're at, because as Mr. Kushel mentioned, there are a couple of things that we need some feedback on. The transfer question obviously being one of them. The industry is changing dramatically, and these licenses tend to be transferred among qualified applicants on a more regular basis than I think people anticipated. And so having a no transfer policy is difficult. So that is something that the board is going to want to discuss. The maximum number of retail licenses the board would want to see is something that in the current draft we've left blank. Functionally, right now on the medical marijuana side, from a retail perspective, there would be a functional maximum of 6 licenses available at any given moment. Right now, under the recreational side and the medical side, there will be 5 overlay districts if this proposal moves forward. And so maximum number of licenses is something that the board will want to discuss. And lastly, the Planning Commission at the last part of their discussion did make the recommendation that to include potential grow operation on Hagedorn Road where one is theoretically permitted now under the medical license. Staff has struck all grows from the ordinance at this time. So the question is, does the board wish to pursue that? And as Mr. Kushel mentioned, the micro business license option on the recreational side is something that the state has created a Class A micro business license that allows growing them up to 300 plants and sales on the same property. That is a viable option and is on the small side of a grow operation. So it's sort of tries to thread that needle of someone who's trying to do, I guess, like a seed to table type thing. So those are really the 3 main questions, aside from the broader policy questions and specifics that you may want to get into. Those are the 3 big questions we do need feedback on so we can sort of finalize this and finalize the draft to move forward. So we're happy to answer any questions that you have while you've got us both here.
Okay. Generally, we'll start with general questions and then deal with the specifics as we go along. What's happening? Oh, okay.
Sorry, I always forget that it changes your screen as well, and I apologize for that. I just wanted to get down to the overlay map here.
Yeah, I did want to see that.
So that we have that available to us during our discussions here.
Okay, Trustee Sunderland?
I just have a question.
Please.
Were we considering having a special session to kind of even dive into this further?
We haven't considered it as a board yet, but that's a possibility.
I'm just wondering, because while this is a lot to take in and digest and
just gotta stop touching.
Just asking.
Treasurer DeShane.
I would back up, Trustee Sunderland, on that. We've got these 3 new questions of the transfer licenses, the maximum number of retail, And this whole new grow operation, which we never really actively considered before, outside of industrial zone, plus the broader policy questions, I think we need to, these are all good questions, the questions the board is going to have to ask and answer, and will, but I would like to think that a study session on these topics and the broader policy question would be a great way to begin this. And we've got the one already planned, and I would think we could find a Tuesday in March that the board is not meeting, that we can sit down for and focus just on this issue for a couple of hours or more.
Other board members? Trustee Wazinski.
Thank you, Supervisor. I appreciate the work session too. This is a lot. I wonder though, there's not all that many changes other than the 3 questions that Director Schmidt is asking us to look at. So I'm just thinking out loud if, how long do we want to prolong this, and just considering how long the last process took. I think it's important to have all the information, make informed decisions, but just given some of that information, just considering the time to ensure that this process is implemented and that the current and or potential permit holders can begin a return on investment that they've made into the community.
Just Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I would agree with a study session. This is a lot of information. I was not on the board when this discussion took place. So I would kind of like to go back in time. I have zero intention of prolonging it. I have every intention of understanding what this is, just like the proposal I made for the sign ordinance to have a study session. I would like to give this a study session as well and give it the same consideration. I don't like to vote on things. I'm not entirely understanding what it is before me, and would like some, this is a lot, like Trustee Sunland said, this is a lot of information. I would like to understand what some of this is more. How we regulate some of these things. So yeah, I would appreciate a study session as well.
Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. I concur with the majority of the group. I believe that these are not just 3 questions.
No.
These are 3 big issues that have impact on our community. And that's why I would concur with a study session to focus on this. And we can make that study session fairly quickly within the next few weeks. And I think that would be our best option so that all concerns can be met.
Trustee Hendrickson.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. On the topic of study sessions, I think it is important that we understand fully what it is we're being asked to approve. While also, I think it is important that we do this in an efficient way. I think the people have spoken on this issue, and they spoke, back in August. And we've been talking about this in various formats for a number of years now. I wasn't on the board when medical passed, but I was on the planning commission, and so we saw at least the zoning portion of it. And that took quite a while once we got going. And I know that the planning commission's already done a fair amount of work on this. So a question that I have procedurally is, we're introducing several ordinances here in order to, make this go at the end of the day. At what point will there be a public hearing in that process?
So on the zoning piece, the public hearing has already been held. That was held at the planning commission level. That is under state law. That is where the public hearing is held.
Right.
And then a public hearing per se does not then need to occur.
Not for the non-zoning ordinance, there wouldn't be a public hearing for the creation of the new ordinance?
Correct. It's just your public meetings. So you have this meeting, then you would have an introduction meeting and an action meeting. So it's all those public comment periods and space on the agenda. If this board would like to set a public hearing, you can do that and have a specific opportunity in your agenda where people could comment specifically on that, or do that at a study session. That's also a public meeting, even though it's a study session. So,
Sure, thank you. I don't want to belabor it too much, because as I mentioned, we've had a lot of public input on this over the last few years. I was curious if one was required of us. I also think that simply by putting this on our agenda, we are offering the public an opportunity to come and speak to us about this. I wonder if, when we approve this for introduction, if we'll have more public input. And so from a scheduling perspective, I wonder if we should, have this up for introduction, perhaps at our next meeting or the meeting after, and then have a study session so that we can get input from the public, dive into it more deeply, and then we can come back to our final discussion on this, our final action on it, with all of those pieces in place. That way we aren't slowing things down tremendously, but we are offering both the public an opportunity to weigh in and giving ourselves an opportunity to sit down with staff and the attorneys to fully understand exactly what it is that we're talking about.
I hate to be a wet blanket, but to actually introduce it, we do need to fill in the blanks.
Right, exactly.
To make it a correct introduction. So we would recommend, I think, to have the study session, then introduce it. Right.
Mr. Schmidt, we also have the option of keeping it as a discussion item until we're ready to either introduce it, until we're ready to introduce it without a separate study session.
Certainly, as a
Continue
supervisor.
at several meetings of having it as a discussion item.
You absolutely have that ability in setting the agenda.
But I do agree that a concentrated study section might be useful to us once we have begun to understand and start making or deciding on the changes we want to adopt. I would suggest then that we put it back. First of all, we have more discussion tonight. We continue to put it in as a discussion item until we decide that we're ready to begin the process of actually changing it and moving it for introduction. Everybody following that?
Question, clarification, Supervisor. So you're suggesting keep it as a discussion item, but we'll still have a study session?
We could have a study section, once we've talked about it and begun to decide what we want, and then we have a study session to solidify all that, and complete the process before we introduce it for adoption and have a vote on adoption.
Forgive my ignorance. So those would happen concurrently? You're thinking like the discussion, it stays on the agenda?
It stays on the discussion on the agenda.
Have the work study session.
And we could decide in that process when we're ready for a focused study session, yes.
Can I ask the township manager a question?
Please.
Thank you. So if we were to have a study session like the first available Tuesday or whatever it is in March, and then at the next township board meeting, we could have introduction, and then the next board meeting could be discussion, correct?
Yeah, I think what the supervisor is suggesting, if I've been hearing this discussion correctly, on the next meeting on the 21st, you'd have it on discussion, and you'd really nail down what the issues that you really want to talk about in a closed session. Right now, you're here, and you want to kind of get to here before you go to the study session to make the study session more useful. Okay. And yes, then the study session would immediately follow the 21st. Could happen within a week to 10 days after that. And from there, then it would go to introduction. So you're looking at probably right now, you're on a schedule to have this wrapped up toward the end of March, roughly. But one other suggestion for you to consider, and I hate to throw a curveball into all of this, but one thing you could also consider, it's up to you, but my thing is just give you ideas and you decide what you want to do, right? So you've got the sign issue that's only been out here for a little while. You have the marijuana issue that's been out here for a long time. One of the things you could do is have it on discussion on the 21st and then have your study session on the 28th on this topic if you believe this is the topic that's ripe on the 28th. If you want to put the signs on the 28th, then you would it would only be about 2 weeks later, you would have a study session for marijuana, for recreational marijuana. So the 21st would be discussion, nail down your issues, and then you would schedule us, and on that agenda would be setting a date for your study session coming up in the 2 weeks following the 21st. And so it'll probably be a study session 2 weeks in a row, actually. And you'll have a study session. The second one would be on recreational marijuana. And then you'd go to introduction in the 1st of March and follow up at the end of March. Does that answer your question?
Yes, can the township, the regularly scheduled township board meeting in March, that first board meeting, be a study session? Can it be like within that board meeting?
Well, so the answer
Some
to that.
regular business, but no.
Yeah. So the answer to that question is the board has the prerogative to do exactly what you want to do, and staff will follow your direction. To give you advice is that I wouldn't do that because you have your community conversation on the 7th.
Exactly.
And that is going to take up that meeting.
That's right, thank you.
But setting a date and having your study session in early March is certainly doable.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Trustee Hendrickson.
I think the manager's made an interesting suggestion about the contents of our study session that we approved this evening, being the the recreational marijuana issue rather than the signs. The signs has been a long time coming, certainly, and it's been something that I know that Director Schmidt and the Planning Commission has worked on tremendously over the last year. But if it waited a month, I think that would keep. If this is the will of the board, that this is an issue that we want to take up, then I don't see any issue with replacing the subject if that's what the board decides.
Trustee
That motion, by the way, Madam Supervisor, did not specify the topic.
Correct.
So all we have to do is just say we're flipping that out and we're going to discuss medical, or I'm sorry, recreational marijuana.
Any other comments? So, would you like to make a motion to?
I don't think it's necessary to do that. I think
to change the subject.
I think the supervisor probably would set the agenda for the study session similarly to as you would for the board meetings.
Okay.
I'm perfectly willing to leave that in your capable hands.
So just to reiterate for the public's knowledge, if this is what the board chooses to do, so everyone's on the same page, February 21st is your next meeting. It'll be on for discussion only. The following Tuesday on the 28th, you'll have a study session on that issue, and then you'll bring it up for where you're going to go with it on the 28th. It could end up on the 2 meetings in March. You're not really expediting the issue because the other schedule was the 2 meetings in March as well. This just puts it on exactly what meeting dates we're going to discuss what. So that's the 21st discussion. The 28th study session will be on that issue. And then the 2 meetings in March would be for the process of that if you move forward with it.
Okay.
Okay, if that makes sense to all of you.
I believe I'm getting a consensus that we would like to go that route.
Yes.
So at our next meeting, we will have it on discussion. We will be prepared to discuss that. And following that, we will have a study session so that we clarify that. So at this point, we could continue with begin our discussion before closing out the night. Do you have any questions?
Oh,
Are you ready?
I prepared as though we were going to discuss the whole thing tonight, so I got to get a couple of the burning questions.
All right, let's go.
So I'll offer a couple of opinions and questions along the way if you would entertain them. So the three main issues, I definitely need to learn more about transferring because that is an area that I don't pretend to fully understand the implications of. With regard to the other two, I'm curious as to, this is perhaps for our township attorney, how would allowing one grow operation in one specific overlay not open us up to a slew of lawsuits from the other, however many, in the other overlays?
Right, there's two answers to that question. The first is economic. There simply was zero interest for growers. You had medical growers available, you received zero medical grower applications. And so I don't see it as being something that's looking to be developed in other areas of the township or to be a large part of the marijuana infrastructure in the township. And then secondly, statutorily, the township has the authority to set the location, time, place, and manner of marijuana establishments. That includes both your zoning authority and this police power regulatory authority. And it would simply be if you have one grower permit available and you have one zoned area and all of a sudden 10 people get contingent purchase agreements and submit great applications, then you do competitive review for your grower and it follows the same process as you would for a retailer.
Okay. I understand why someone might want to do this in the same way that a microbrewery would want to be able to brew and sell at their own location. Even if we have the regulatory authority to do so, it makes me a little uneasy. Just simply because it feels discriminatory, even if it isn't. And I believe, if I'm understanding this correctly, this came from one of the applicants who already is an existing medical permit in one of these overlay areas. Is that accurate?
Roughly. They continued to bring the issue up at the planning commission, and the planning commission did make that recommendation at their final discussion on the topic. And so it was sort of driven through their public comment on the matter.
Right. Doesn't feel like I understand that they want to do business here, and that's terrific, and I want them to do business here. But I don't know that we should be shaping our ordinance around one specific applicant at one specific point in time. So that has me a bit uneasy. With regard to I just lost all my screens. With regard to the maximum number of retail licenses, which is the other broad operative question, I want to commend the work that they did to amend the overlay map. I think that this number is a fine number after removing the Towner Road and the Dawn Avenue sections from the previous overlay map. One thing I noted was that you indicated that there was, I think it was overlay 3, that you could theoretically fit more than one establishment in there. Is that just like corner to corner if you were to do the two opposite parcels that would fit, or how?
So it is surprisingly not just corner to corner, but the fact that the existing medical licensee is at the far eastern end of that district, which was added in at the last minute of the medical discussion. Mm-hmm. It just happened to be that they're far enough to the east that you could then, and it's not just like Old Chicago, there are multiple properties then along Marsh and Grand River, and potentially, I say Newman, but it's Target, mm-hmm. That could qualify then even with the 2,000-foot separation.
Sure. I think the intent of the 2,000-foot separation, not to dive into the minds too much of anyone else, was so that you would have one per overlay area. And so what is the distance required that would get us to that goal?
If the goal is one per overlay, we would simply recommend stating 1 per overlay.
Okay.
That we're allowed to do that.
I guess,
And we would,
why did we choose to do it this way instead of that?
because the zoning ordinance doesn't have that ability, and so the 2,000 feet came out of the zoning ordinance. That was the limitation that you can do in the zoning ordinance, is a separation requirement.
I see. Okay. For my personal opinion, I think 1 per overlay certainly suffices from a retail perspective. So that would be my opinion there. Now, there were a couple of sort of fly-specky things, if you don't mind me getting into the specifics of it briefly. I mentioned one of them to Director Schmidt, which was there was a point in here that appeared to be incongruous with the ordinance, the memo of the ordinance were not in alignment, that indicated that the board would be involved in renewals. It's administrative decision for renewals, is that right?
That's the main thrust of the text, but I do take the point is well made, and there is some tension there because that policy decision hasn't been made. So, right, whether that wants to go to the board or whether that you want to leave that as renewal, there's a few pieces of tension still that we would make sure to go through and fly spec very well once having confirmation of the policy direction. So there are a few pieces like that where I would, really check the language to make sure, okay, we'll get it specifically set with that direction.
Okay. So from my perspective, if an applicant has gone through a competitive review process and the township staff has deemed it to be, the applicant to be continuing on and, performing well, I don't see any reason to bring 5 applicants back in front of us every year to have their permits renewed. That seems a bit excessive to me. And then on page 12 of the ordinance of the renewal procedure, you identify major and minor amendments, which you talked about briefly. Minor amendments I see in E2, the director may grant final approval to the renewal applications with minor amendments and issue the permit. It does not say what happens with renewals that have undergone major amendments. Can you speak to that?
I mean, the intent is that a major amendment would have to come back to the board, but that's one of the pieces that I think Attorney Kushel mentioned that is going to have to be fleshed out when we get to the competitive review standards, which will come after the ordinance is in place.
Okay. Okay. And then under the competitive review, we would see all the applicants, or how would that, talk me through the process of how that would work.
That can work a multitude of ways, frankly.
Right, so it can be as simple as you set up 10 factors that get scored, you direct the director to score them and give you summaries, and then you make a decision. Or it can be as complex as each one of you goes through every application, scores them individually. You all talk about, what your vision of the community is and how this applicant fits in that vision. We get, an aggregate score that then gets ranked out, and then you get a competitive piece and then you could do something in the middle where Director Schmidt, and he does an initial scoring and review, submits that to a subcommittee who makes a final review and recommends a decision to this board for final approval, where sort of, the heavy lifting gets taken care of, gets split in half, not fully administrative, but subcommittee, so not full board, but then still having a full board check. So I've seen throughout the state all of those scenarios being utilized. So those are well known, or at least those have been used in the past. And not to get too crazy, but as creative as you can get, I will work to implement the desires of the board.
Sure. Okay. So suffice it to say that in addition to the ordinance, there's still a lot of work that would have to get done.
Correct.
To prepare this secondary standards and policies document that you referenced.
Correct.
So just so that, we are all on the same page in terms of timeline, okay, sure, we can have a study session, introduce and pass an ordinance. But then there's, presumably months worth of work to generate this document that currently exists nowhere with policies and standards and a lot of board input and a lot of board decision-making on how we want to go about all of those things that would happen in the months to come after that.
Yes, and again, the board can drive and direct the timing of that, and respond to the feedback that it receives. So it would be possible, for example, as part of discussion on the 21st, we can get started on a policy document. That'd be fairly vanilla, but we could get you something for the 21st to at least have you thinking about that. It could be part of the discussion session on the 28th. So whether that develops in tandem with the ordinance at the same time and you're doing all the work at the same time, that's possible, right? And we'll utilize a lot of bandwidth to do that. Alternatively, you can take the other approach is let's get the black letter law and the ordinance in place first, focus my energy there, and then I'll focus my energy on the competitive standards. That's going to be a bit longer of a process, but allow you to manage your bandwidth and the other policy priorities of the township.
Sure. I mean, that's a really tough question because to me it doesn't make sense to have an ordinance that we can't use, right? Like, I personally would like to see us get to the point where we can have it ready to go and done concurrently, so that we're not saying, okay, we've got the ordinance and now, we've got to wait 6 months before we can actually use it. That to me doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So anyway, I've taken up a lot of time with a lot of questions, but that's what I've got for now.
Treasurer DeShane.
Thank you. Regarding the question of lawsuits likely to come out of us saying no to other grow operations, I think the reason we haven't gotten additional applications for grow out of the medical community is we restricted that to industrial zones. And we only have one of those overlays in industrial zones, and so that would be your answer as to why there was no interest in grow operations, because the other 6 had no industrial zoning that would allow them to have grown. So I don't know that it's a market answer, but I share Trustee Hendrickson's fear that if we allow it for one, A, it seems unfair, and 2, we open the door to lawsuits. And from anecdotally, I've heard that this is a very litigious area of regulation. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree with that.
So anything we can do to restrict their likelihood of being sued would be preferable to me, because I'm guessing that our legal fees alone will consume every bit of licensing and probably much of the tax revenue we get from this, if our experience is similar to other facilities. So this is not going to be a revenue generator. We're just going to try and manage our losses in this matter. Regarding the other excellent question that Trustee Hendrickson brought up about developing the policies as in tandem with the ordinance, I think it's like trying to change a tire on a moving car. I think we should create the law, create the ordinance, and then from there, we know exactly what this board has decided on. From there, writing the policy would follow. It seems like we could end up doing a lot of work more than once if the board changes its mind on this issue or that issue. This is a big change for Meridian Township, and I think we need to do it right and follow the right steps for it. Those are my comments.
Other board members. Trustee Wilson.
First, I'd like to concur with the last 2 speakers on the issues of having only one grow license and in a specific area. I think we should let that go away with the medical marijuana usage and have one single approach to how we're going to have retail marijuana in this area. I also concur with Trustee Hendrickson on one facility per overlay district, which makes sense, and from a competitive aspect also makes sense. I share the concern about getting involved in lawsuits, so perhaps our attorney could help us at a future date in avoiding, whenever we get to writing the final ordinance, avoiding those things that are most litigious, so that we can have as clean an ordinance as we can and the most level, non-discriminatory play field for everyone who is interested in pursuing an operation such as this. I would like to ask the question about transfers. Tim, you said they're problematic. Is this transfer of ownership?
It is. So there's sort of two pieces here. Many of these groups take on minority partners as they evolve. And so that's right now we tossed around a 12% transfer as a maximum in a given year so that a full transfer couldn't happen functionally for 5 years. The current medical ordinance restricts out of township owners from transferring within 30 months. But then after that 30 months, there's no language of what actually happens. So it's just something that we are going to have to build that piece, and we'll need some feedback on that. That certainly, again, could be part of the standards for competitive review. If we take that 30-month transfer limitation that exists on the medical side from an application perspective and slide it over to a standard of points that you get 5 points if you restrict your transfers for a period of 30 months, that is something that we can do. And
It appears in the ordinance, the way you're proposing it is no transfers.
right now it's written as no transfers because that is functionally what we have right now.
And that makes sense, I think. Absolutely. I applaud the fact that in, I don't know what section this is number 10, where you're looking at environmental concerns of odors, because that is one thing that has been brought up by multiple people to me, that they're concerned about that, and you do address this in here. So those are the things on my mind right now. Thank you.
Clerk Guthrie?
Thank you. I have a concern about curbside service. You say no curbside service. Can you explain why?
This was an item the Planning Commission was pretty unified in their regard that they did not want business transacting outside of the structure. So no vehicular, because I think at least one of the planning commissioners had a specific concern with how other operators were functioning in other communities and saw it as a potential negative that we're trying to head off in Meridian Township.
Right, and I think you can analogize to alcohol, right? That was also part of the push for the statewide ballot was regulate marijuana like you regulate alcohol. Well, you can't buy alcohol at a drive-through. You can't buy alcohol in the parking lot of a liquor store. You have to go into the liquor store. So again, following that analogy,
I can have alcohol delivered to my house. I can go on the Shipt app and have a Meyer shopper deliver alcohol to my house. And when I was taking care of my mother last year, I went to a marijuana establishment and they gave curbside service. There are instances where people cannot get out of their vehicle. So I have an issue with someone who possibly can't get out of their car who's not mobile. We're restricting it from being delivered, and we're restricting it from a drive-through window, and restricting it from curbside service. So I have an issue with someone who's has a lot of mobility issues not being able to go get, if we're trying to bring this here to the township, now we're restricting them. They're still going to go over to East Lansing to get curbside service for marijuana. So I would rather have a curbside service, an option for people who, I know people with fibromyalgia, they just have struggles moving around. And so I would rather see curbside service or something in there. I don't know if there's lawsuits with that, what the issues are, what the planning commission had an issue with in that regard.
So no litigation on that point that I'm aware of. The one other thing I can say is it's not all or nothing. So we could look at ways to permit some, but not others. Certainly delivery is distinct from the curbside service.
Yes.
If we could do something like permit curbside service but not allow drive-throughs, then we're really getting into the weeds. I'd want to go, look at that before I gave you advice. But I can say certainly delivery is a different mechanism, regulated differently in the state rules, and could be regulated differently under the ordinance than curbside service. So there can be a robust discussion of how we could approach that issue.
And then how would we, from that meeting that I was at last Monday, I think you were on it too. I think I saw you on Zoom.
Yes, I was.
There was discussion about, and Trustee Wilson brought this up in regards to emissions and how it's regulated. And there was discussion in that Zoom meeting about one entity saying it's an environmental issue because it's being emitted into the environment, and someone else is saying it's a different. How do we really regulate that?
That's an easy one. I mean, that's a standard zoning practice that goes back since the early 1900s, that if there's an odor, noise, smoke, any of those issues functionally visible at the edge of premises, we can issue tickets for that. So if there is a noticeable odor emanating from, frankly, any property within the township, we can cite them under the zoning ordinance for a violation.
So it's the same kind of
Yeah,
code violation
they're treated
process.
no differently than any other property in that regard.
Okay, and then in regards to transfers, I hate to go back to this, and but I know we have liquor license transfers. What's the big difference between that and marijuana license transfers?
I think the short answer to that question is that this is an unsettled area of law, and it hasn't developed the way liquor licenses have. So for example, the CRA does not permit a straight transfer of a state CRA license. They require reapplication if they do, and then it's actually an asset purchase agreement on the side with a different state application. So the way they're approaching their state permits seems to be different than the way liquor permits are handled at the state and pseudo-local level. And then also that's been driven, again, at the local level with similar concerns about who, you're going to do this very difficult work of a competitive review process, which is very applicant specific, and how they're going to operate to just have them turn around and sell that to a third-party investor who is not vetted by the township. So I think there's concerns about that from municipalities in terms of how they evaluate who's operating and then what transferring potentially does within the township scheme.
So a liquor license, they have that liquor license with the state, and it's here with the township. And then if they transfer that, is that through the state?
Yes, the state liquor license, Michigan Liquor Commission transfers the license.
Okay.
Typically, we get courtesy, at this point, we are at a situation where we get courtesy notification of that pending transfer, but local input on transfers has been severely curtailed in recent years.
Can it be that simple with marijuana licenses, or simpler than the process that I heard you talk about earlier?
I mean, we can look into a potential option to mirror the CRA's transfer process. That's something we can look into.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see something like that at the study session, some other options for the transferability of licenses, curbside service. I think those were my two biggest concerns when I read the packet, when I looked through the packet. And then I concur with the other trustees, what they said.
Trustee Wisniewski. I have lots of questions, but I will just ask one that I need going home with so that I can come back with some better information. We talk about the competitive application. Lottery's not allowable. Competitive application. And this might not be something we know tonight, but we have existing medical permit holders. is it expected that they'll just be able to transfer into rec, or are we going to expect all of our existing permit holders to also apply competitively?
They will have to comply competitively.
Based on the ordinance, or just, is there options for that as well?
Yes. So they will have to comply competitively. How the competitive review factors evaluate an applicant's history in the township would be left to those procedures and standards. And specific implementation of that would need, again, depending on how it's implemented, could be very straightforward, could need closer study to gauge the litigation risk that potential factors might increase.
Thank you.
Let me ask a question that's kind of bugging me. So is the presumption that the whole medical marijuana structure is going to go away?
No. So go away completely? No, not right now. So what we've seen on a statewide basis over the last calendar year, there's been a reduction in patients by about 25%. So that's a pretty big decline. So the market there is shrinking. But the caregiver aspect, which is what we initiated all this with in 2008, is still very much alive and very strong, and showed that in some of the legislative session. So there is still strong support for that. And also, I travel around the state a little bit, and that is a lot of the feedback I'll get is, hey, I was on these 15 medications, then I got medical marijuana, now I'm only on 2 pharmaceuticals because marijuana helps manage my pain and my inflammation, whatever. So there is still, and then there's other medical aspects about what they can buy there. I've heard different feedback about that. So there is still some market there, but it's shrinking. There's still support for that, but it's losing momentum as we move into recreational. The other thing that we've seen develop is a desire to unify all the acts, because currently we have 3. It'd be great if it could streamline down to 1. There's a bunch of procedural issues with that, about legislative votes and the way all these 3 got put together that are presenting challenges. So that has not occurred yet. But for example, I think it was Colorado they mentioned on that call. They also had a medical, then a rec, and eventually they were able to come and unify their systems. So yes, having them all kind of come together may happen at some point, but I suspect some type of medical use recognition of marijuana will continue. But as we've seen here locally at the township, not a whole lot of enthusiasm for medical, because we passed that ordinance 2019.
Yes, sir.
And nobody's opened a storefront, and we're in 2023. So that's what we see here in this specific location.
Could we, I kind of always envision the 2 coming together. Could we, in our qualifying assessment, require or at least advantage businesses that had both permits?
I would not at this point recommend requiring them to have both because of the way medical was implemented in Meridian. How you could advantage them, I think there's some pathways potentially there, and that gets back to my response to Trustee Wazinski, that depending on what and how that gets put into your competitive review process would need close evaluation of how are we impacting our litigation temperature and our litigation risk.
Okay. Any further questions and comments tonight? We'll come back to this on our agenda at our next meeting.
We appreciate the feedback. We will be back with some follow-ups at our next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've come to item 14 on our agenda, comments from the public. Are there members of the public that would like to speak to the planning commission at this, the board at this point? Forgot where I was.
It happens.
Seeing none, we'll move on to item 15, other matters and board member comments. Clerk Guthrie.
Real quick, and I meant to mention this earlier, I want to thank the Environmental Commission for all of their hard work on the climate sustainability plan and their continued efforts to push this township in the right direction, and whatever we can do as a board to support that. You let us know.
Working on it.
Did you see that, Frank?
I would add to that comment, this is one of the few places we've seen the aggregated impacts, the numbers to support the success we've had, and we appreciate seeing that on a regular basis as well. Any other comments? Then item 16 on our agenda is a closed session. We need to, after we close the meeting, okay. Mr. DeShane.
I move that we go into closed session for a collective bargaining union negotiations discussion under MCL 15268.268(1)C.
Support.
Been moved and supported that we go into closed session for a specific purpose. I believe we need a roll call vote for Mr. Lemaster.
Clerk Guthrie.
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane.
Yes.
Trustee Hendrickson.
Yes.
Trustee Sundland.
Yes.
Trustee Wilson.
Yes.
Trustee Wazinski.
Yes.
Supervisor Jackson.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
All right. Before, let's see, this is 8:30, we're going into closed session. And before we start, we'll take 5.
Break?
Okay, yes.